Good morning and welcome to the practice. This morning I have a 60-minute yin flow for the legs. If you're not familiar with yin, it is the softer side of the practice. Our bodies are made up of yin and yang. Our entire experience, frankly, is made up of yin and yang. Everything that we experience in the world is a balance of the yin and the yang. And in the same nature, it's important for us to take some time with the yin tissues of our body, the bones, the ligaments, the joints, and the fascia, this gossamer-like body stocking that really encases our whole physical being. It's like an extra layer of skin underneath the skin. And so many yoga classes, whether it's a hatha class or a vinyasa class, will target some of the yang tissues of the body, blood, muscles, skin. These are tissues that are elastic and warm. And yin tissues are the ones that are cooler and they are plastic. They require longer held periods of stress with less intensity. So as you can see, I have several props set over here to the side. You can set yourself up accordingly and become imaginative and inventive with pillows and blankets, whatever you have in your home to support you. But do come to your seat when you're ready, and we'll begin the practice with a short meditation. You might allow your eyes to close this morning, or whatever time of day it is that you're practicing. It's morning here, and morning is a great time to practice yin, a gentle way to wake up the body and prepare ourselves for the rest of the day. And as you sit for these first couple of moments, you may shift some of your attention to your breath, becoming aware of how the breath moves in and out of the body. Notice what your experience is like here. Notice where your attention is resting. What becomes available to you when you go inward, when you introduce some stillness into your experience? Just about another 30 seconds here, maybe with the invitation to allow your attention to become intentional, resting attention on the breath, on the senses, on whatever is present. And then when you're ready, gently opening up the eyes. And to begin with some movement, we'll introduce a three-part Taoist breath. So you can watch along once with me or copy me as I do it. But we'll inhale, take the arms out and up to the side. And then exhale, bring the hands down behind the head, flip the palms, and then try to push like you're pushing walls away. Let this be stiff and sturdy. Inhale, flip the hands again, bring the fingertips to the shoulders. And then exhale, push forward and round. Inhale, lift the body, lift the arms. And exhale, drape everything forward. You could fold forward over your legs if you'd like. Inhale, pick the body up, reach the arms to the sky, and we start all over again. Exhale, hands behind head, push the walls away. Inhale, fingertips to shoulders. And then exhale, rounding through the spine as you push forward. Inhale, arms high. And exhale, release forward. Last time here. Inhale, stretch the arms, lift the body, gather in what's around you. Exhale, hands behind head, push the hands outward, strong, sturdy. And then light, flip the fingertips towards the shoulders. Inhale. Exhale, push. Inhale to the sky. And then exhale, forward. To whatever degree feels comfortable for you, you might want to bring the upper body all the way forward over the legs and relax there for a moment. But do come up when you're ready, and we'll move into our first position for the day. And that's going to be a butterfly. So in butterfly, you can be sitting on your hips and bring the soles of your feet together. And this is essentially the shape of the pose. You'll allow the spine to flex forward if that feels comfortable. But as you arrive into the shape, you might notice that you may need some support. So you see I have my props over here. You could take a folded blanket and put it underneath your hips to allow the pelvis to have a little bit more of a forward tilt, an anterior tilt. And then you might notice there could be some sensation in the knees that may become uncomfortable or painful. Perhaps the knees are compromised in this position, so you can simply place blocks underneath the knees and allow the body to fold forward. But one of the principles of the yin practice is to hold for time. So I'll be timing us in each of these postures, and we'll do longer holds here. But it's the first principle of yin that is the one that we really want to use to determine which props we want to make available to ourselves here. So if you haven't already, you can allow the chin to drop towards the chest. Bring a little bit of a stress into the back of the neck. And ultimately, it's what we're aiming to do is to stress the body. The sensation that you're starting to experience in the posture is a form of stress. It's one of the basic theories of exercise that we stress the body and then we rest. So the first principle of yin yoga is to come to your edge. And I invite you to use the props to support you in stepping towards that edge this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening, whenever it is that you're practicing. The edge is a place that, like Goldilocks found, it's not too hot, it's not too cold, it's not too big, it's not too small, but it's just right. And the second principle of yin yoga is to become still. So once you've stepped up to that edge, invite some stillness into your experience and see if, you know, largely you can relax the musculature of the body so that there's nothing holding you here, and you're starting to submit and to yield a little bit to the forces of gravity based on the shape that you've put your body in. And the third principle of yin yoga is to hold for time. So we remain here for a number of breaths. Again, coming back to the idea of yin and yang tissues. Yang tissues are going to do better when they're stressed in a yang way, and yin tissues will do better when stressed in a yin way. So some of the tissues that we're aiming to stress here: ligaments, bones, joints, and fascia. Yang exercise targets the yang tissues. They like to be moved rhythmically and repetitively. And the static holds are brief because these muscles are elastic and they can take this type of exercise. However, if we try to do yang to yin tissues, the joints, the ligaments, the bones, the fascia, the yin tissues can become damaged. Yin tissues are more plastic and therefore require gentler but longer held stress. Just take about 2 more breaths here. Inviting the breath into the areas in your body and in your experience where you feel sensation. And then when you're ready, slowly, which means not quickly, but slowly, come up. You might push the hands into the feet or into the earth. Allow the upper body to rise. And one of the beautiful things about the yin practice is, as much as it is about the pose, it's about the counter pose. So it might feel nice for you to stretch your legs out long here and take your hands briefly behind the back. Introduce a little bit of extension through the upper back. Maybe bring one shoulder forward and then the next. And whatever the counter pose is going to be, it will be yours. So find something that works in your body. It might be coming still again. But when you're ready, we'll go ahead and shift into our next posture, which is going to be a wide-legged straddle. Again, we'll invite our upper body into some forward flexion. Now you notice here that I have my socks on. Yin is a practice that can be done with many layers, sweatshirts, socks, long underwear. When you feel ready and you have the legs to an appropriate width, you can start to fold forward at the upper body. And again, notice the sensation and start to align your body in a way that's going to make it supportive for you to step up to your edge. And that might look like a bolster underneath the face to rest the head down onto, and get creative. You may need to stack a block and a bolster. You could turn one cheek to the side, you could place the forehead on the bolster, but I'll go ahead and begin the timer here. So once you do step up to that edge, I'll invite us into this second principle of the yin practice, which is becoming still. If you feel that there is too much rounding in your lower back, invitation to take a blanket underneath the hips to raise the hips up a little bit, again with that intention of creating a forward tilt in the pelvis. So when we're bringing the upper body into flexion, which is folding forward, we also want to imagine that the hips are gently tilting forward, the pelvis, which is called an anterior tilt of the pelvis. Anterior being the front side of the body. So the front side of the pelvis is tipping towards the front side of the body. And sometimes it requires a few blankets. Go for something soft. Blankets under the hips here. And then we hold for time. With this reminder that it's our yin tissues that prefer gentler and longer held stresses. Not necessarily like doing several sun salutations repetitively or chaturangas repetitively. As a metaphor, you might think of yin tissues like a credit card, that if you bent back and forth repetitively, well, it would eventually snap. We don't want to stress our yin tissues in this way. And remembering that yin and yang is a balance. So the rule is not to do not practice yang, do not practice yin. It's to find a balance between the two. Allow the breath to be present in your experience, so that while we create stillness in the body, stillness in the mind as best as possible, we do allow the dynamic alignment of our experience to be present through the breath. So sending the breath into the areas where you feel sensation, maybe the backs of the hamstrings. In this forward folding pose, maybe there's an opportunity to bring a little bit of stress into the back of the neck as well. You might become aware of an edge that exists beyond just the physical, an edge that exists in your mental experience, or perhaps even your psycho-emotional experience. And remember, the same rule applies here. So, Goldilocks. We don't need to go too far. We don't need to take too much or go too deep. Let the edge be the place that feels just right. Not too much and not too little. Just about another 30 seconds here. You might even find that the exhale takes you to a new edge. The edge is not fixed. It ebbs and flows along with our experience. And when you're ready, you could press into your hands and slowly again, which means not quickly, slowly, start to walk the hands back, bring the upper body upright, move any of your props off to the side, and shift into whatever counter pose you'd like to use. I'm going to bend my legs and lean back onto my hands to take a few windshield wipers, dropping the knees from one side into the next. That might feel nice for you. We're targeting the legs today. So we've already experienced a little bit of sensation in the outer hips by taking our butterfly pose, inner thighs and hamstrings. And we have one more posture where we'll do some forward flexion here. And again, this might be a posture where you like to sit up onto something. So you can see I have a blanket here. I'll bring my hips up onto the blanket and allow my legs to be forward out in front of me before folding over my legs and do what is called caterpillar pose in yin. And as best as possible, I'll start to apply the 3 principles of yin yoga, and I invite you to do the same. As you arrive in the pose, step up to the edge and let that edge be a place where it feels supportive to be still for time. That is the 3rd principle. Maybe there's a block under the head. I'll go ahead and start the timer now. And we'll be here. If you had to categorize this notion of being versus doing, which would fall under yin and which would fall under yang? And for me, the being is the yin side. The doing is the yang side. The being is the inner, the yin. And the doing is the outer, the manifestation, the yang. And remember, this is not one or the other. Both exist simultaneously. And we have opportunities as creatures of nature to align our experience with these contrasting sides of nature, the dark and the light. Remember as you hold here that the breath may take you to a new edge. It certainly does take some wisdom and cultivating of that wisdom to listen to the breath in the same way that we listen to the mind. But as you become still here, what does the breath tell you? About 30 more seconds here. When you're ready, using the hands again, coming up slowly, and watching and experiencing the sensations of coming out as much as you were experiencing them when you were in the posture. I'll show you another opportunity for a counter pose here would be to take the hands behind the back slightly, fingers pointing towards the feet, and then to bend the legs and lift the hips into a reverse tabletop. And that might feel nice in your body. It might not. Every one of us will be a little bit different. So I invite you to step into the counter pose that's going to work for you. Spend another 3 to 5 breaths there, whether that's windshield wipers reverse table, or simply finding some stillness between sides. Some teachers teach yin by offering shavasana between every posture. So there are many options here. So remember that yin is the slow side. So fight the desire to go quickly if that's a desire that is present for you. And coming into our next pose, we'll go into a pose called swan pose in yin, better known in the yang practice as pigeon, probably. And again, prop yourself up. Prop it up in the way that you need to. So maybe there's a blanket or a block even forward underneath this front hip, but the invitation will be to come to hands and knees and then take your right shin across the mat. And once you do that, you may adjust, right? Adjust to start to come to the edge. So, like I mentioned, support underneath this front hip, blocks, blankets, bolsters even. There are many variations, and this is a posture that can be a little tough on the knees for some. So if you're feeling all right here, I invite you to stay, and I'll begin the timer for the first part of this posture will be about 2 minutes in this upright swan. You could relax the hands onto the body so you don't have to work or hold the musculature. For some students, it might feel nice to just simply roll off to your right side to decrease the intensity in your knee. And for others, you'll like to find a figure four pose. So simply by coming again onto your hands, or excuse me, onto your hips, crossing this ankle, and allowing the figure four to bring some opening and some stress into your right hip in this way. If you're in this option, I'll invite you to take a strong flex through your right foot, the lifted leg. And then you can keep that flex to the degree that feels appropriate for you in the posture this morning. But if you're in the full swan, we'll be here just about another minute. And we're letting go. We're not holding, we're not gripping. In yin, we're not activating. We are passively stretching. And we're doing so in a way that feels supportive for the body by having a very light, weight load on the joints. And we use the props to support us in that way. So we'll have spent half the time in our full swan here, and then we'll spend the other half of the time for this posture in our sleeping swan. So when you're ready, you can start to crawl the upper body forward and release the head down to the earth. Again, maybe there's a block under the head, maybe there's a bolster. For students who are looking for a little more, you could thread your left arm underneath your right and relax your left shoulder down to the earth while you hold here for the next 2 minutes. Students who are in a figure four can either come to their backs in a figure four or even shift into a momentary shavasana while we stay for the next couple of moments in this posture. Coming to the edge, becoming still, and holding for time. Last couple of breaths here. And when you're ready, using your hands into the earth to gently wake up your swan. And for me, I'm just going to roll off to my right to transition out of this, bending my back leg, coming back to my hips. If you'd like to pass through a downward facing dog or step back in a way that feels supportive for you, I invite you to do so. We'll go ahead and we'll move into our next posture right away. So I'll mirror you here. The invitation is going to be for you to move into a shoelace pose. And the first thing I'll mention is that shoelace is definitely a posture where some people like to have something underneath their hips. So if you'd like to raise the hips up, you're more than welcome to do that. But I'll invite us into the posture all in the same way. Once the hips are lifted, you can bend both legs and take your left hand. I'll mirror you here. Your left hand underneath your left leg and grab your right ankle. And the right ankle will come through. And then the left leg will come on top. And you'll start to just sort of work the heels back towards the hips. Knees are stacked more or less. And with these knees stacked, you'll start to feel into the external rotation. And some of us may have already found the edge in this posture, as the hips can be quite tight for some of us. Others, by flexing forward in the body, will find a little bit more opportunity for external rotation and to sort of snug those legs a little back closer towards the hips as you bring the upper body forward to the place where you can allow yourself to come into your edge, become still, and hold for time. And you can use these three principles in tandem with one another. So if you feel as though you can't become still or you can't hold for time, maybe you haven't reached your edge, or maybe you need to back off a little bit. So these principles are synchronistic and synergistic. They exist simultaneously. And just a reminder that some of us won't want to fold forward in the upper body. Some of us will be fine just here. But the goal is to let the hips marinate in this posture. If the upper body is flexed forward, there are some variations as always. You could relax the block for your forehead. Sometimes it's nice even to just take your chin and hook it on the outside of that top knee to create a point of leverage. Excuse me. But check in here for any spots that are holding or that are tense. And what I mean when I say that is to try to let them go if they're unnecessarily holding. Sometimes we over effort and use more than is necessary. And it's the yin practice that invites us to deactivate. Just about one more minute here. Preparing to transition over the course, of the next couple of breaths, using your hands to support you to come back slowly, which again means not quickly, to an upright position, and starting to come out of the pose in a way that feels supportive for you, uncrossing the legs and remembering that we've held the poses so that we can experience this after sensation. Maybe there's some windshield wiper action in the legs. The windshield wiper basically just takes the legs into internal rotation on one side of the next. And in our saddle pose and our pigeon pose, or swan, actually it's shoelace and swan, we're deeply externally rotating through the hips and the legs. So the counter of internal rotation may feel nice for you here. And then once you're ready, we'll move into these two postures on the second side. So it's going to be the left shin across the mat in our swan pose, or the opposite shin that you did the first time. Now this left leg has already had a little bit of rotation based on the shoelace posture that we just did, so we're working backwards a little bit. But prop up, and I'll go ahead and begin the timer for the first couple of minutes. If you need your figure four, I'll demonstrate that momentarily. But even notice how the hands are active into the earth. Let them be like stilts that hold you up and that support you exactly as how you are here. So you don't need to grip, you don't need to push or hold, but the structure that you've put in place is going to support the stillness and the deactivation of your musculature. And use the first couple rounds of breath to find the edge, that it's going to be appropriate for you. Knowing that we'll be upright here for about another 90 seconds. If you're in figure four, invitation to come onto your hips, cross left ankle over right knee, and then similarly with the idea of stilts, could be like the hands are propped back behind you. And you step into that edge. You become still. And you hold for time. And the exception to the rule here is maybe a flex through that lifted foot if you are in your figure four to protect the knee. When we come up to this edge that we're talking about so much in this class, there's a useful question we can ask ourselves, and it's a question of what stops me? And physically, there's either going to be two things that stop you in the body: tension or compression. So when you're ready, you can walk the upper body forward and move into your sleeping swan. Go to sleep here, and if you actually do, that's totally okay. So compression is the sensation when two things are coming together, two forces are coming together in a way. That might be bone on bone, it might be muscle on muscle. And tension is when something is being stretched apart. So you may feel some tension along your right hip flexor here in your pigeon posture or swan. Will be your last 2 to 3 breaths here, please. And when you feel ready, starting to activate the hands into the earth, moving once again, becoming active and doing once again in this transition to bring the body upright. Like I mentioned, I'm just going to roll off to my left side. If that feels like an easy transition for you, you're more than welcome. And then prepare yourself to move into a shoelace on the other side. So once again, I'll mirror you, but we'll get our right leg on top this time. So it'll be the right hand underneath the right leg to the left ankle. And then that draws the left ankle not only underneath the leg, but close back towards the hip as much as possible. And this leg might not like to go down for some of you, so there could be a block that comes here as the other leg comes on top. And sometimes there's quite a amount of space between this top leg and the bottom leg, and we like to have another block. It's going to depend on how your body is, right? And if you ever have a question about that, get in touch, reach out, and we'll find a posture that works for you. But we're in shoelace here, and I used to think that this was called shoelace because the legs were somehow knotted up like a shoelace, and I found out later that it's actually because, oh, well, the feet are quite close to the body, and you could tie your shoes in this position. I kind of like my version better, but you pick your own version and let me know how this pose feels like shoelace to you. And of course, the invitation will be to flex forward in the spine as you feel ready. And that's if you feel ready. So for some, we'll hold all 3 minutes here, upright. Wherever you are, you find the edge, you become still, and you hold for time. And just know that your pose and your edge will be different than my pose and my edge. And even your time may be different than my time. Of course, I'm guiding you in and out of these postures, but please know that you're really in choice here about when you step in and when you step out of these postures. You are the pilot flying your own plane. And all the other people who are there giving you advice and teaching you, they can be thought of as ground control, the ones helping to guide. But there's only one pilot, and that is you, for your own experience. We've just about another 30 seconds here in this posture. So whenever you feel ready, you can start to prepare the body to transition using the hands observing the sensation that comes into the body as you transition from this posture to the counter pose, which could be windshield wipers, it could be stillness, it could be reverse table, whatever's feeling supportive for you here in terms of counter pose. So we just have two more postures. Three, of course, if you include Shavasana, which is the ultimate posture, in my opinion. But we'll come to lying on our backs now. We're more or less done with the legs. So tell your legs that they've done a great job. We've worked the legs in many different ways so far. And as you come onto your back, we're going to move into a pose called Banana Asana. And this is a pose that has a lot of appeal. On your backs, you can start to walk the upper body over towards the right. We're basically going to make a C curve with our body. Once the upper body is over to the right, it should be quite easy to move the right leg towards the right. And then followed by the left leg. This will be a little more challenging, moving the left leg towards that bottom right side of your mat. And the degree to which you bring that left leg towards the right is going to help you determine your edge. Some of you may even like to stack left ankle on top of right ankle and feel the left hip become heavy, almost as though there's a sandbag weighing down that left hip. So the hips are even. Some might like to drape their hands up overhead like you see me doing here, clasping for opposite elbows, or maybe even extending all the way through the arms and clasping left wrist with right hand. But I'll go ahead and begin the timer here. The invitation is to bring a stress all the way down the left side of the body, working our spine into some lateral flexion here. In this style of yin, you might take some time to reflect on what your habitual response is to stillness, to silence. What is your habitual response to stepping up to an edge? Habitual response to stress. Stress has generally taken a negative connotation in our culture because as a people, we tend to be overstressed. Really, stress is one of the most useful things that we can have in our experience if we use it productively. The basic theory of exercise is that we stress the body and then we rest. Yin is a really beautiful balance of those two aspects. Sometimes the resting aspect eludes us, but with yin, it's right inside of the practice. You can't avoid it. And as you notice your habitual response, whether it's one that is welcome or perhaps there's quite a bit of resistance to this yin side, there's an invitation to just receive that as more information for you in a non-judgmental way, in a non-discriminatory fashion, simply as information. And over the course of the next 3 to 5 breaths, please slowly transition back through center. The counter pose for Banana Asana is to hug the two knees into the chest. Maybe make a few circles with the legs. Feel what it's like for the tailbone to curl up off the earth, bring some rounding into the lowest part of your spine. You could even curl your head up towards your knees before preparing to shift into the second side, Banana Asana. I wouldn't normally recommend having 2 bananas in one day, but with yin, it's okay. So we'll start by shifting the upper body to the left, moving your left foot off to the left. That's the easy one. And then as you shift your right leg over towards that lower left side of your mat, you'll notice that might be a little more challenging. So step into your edge in your body. And then you'll introduce a variation into your upper body that includes maybe clasping elbows overhead or elongating the arms, grabbing your right wrist with your left hand. Maybe your right ankle is stacked on top of your left. It's all up to you here. Where is your edge? Inviting in this quality of being. If you are practicing in the morning, acknowledging that there is likely a great amount of doing that will be asked of you as you move through your day. Maybe if you're practicing at the end of the day, you've been asked a great amount of doing. And the being was existing all along. But sometimes in the stillness, our capacity for awareness around our nature of being has the opportunity to expand. And then that influences our doing. And staying present with this right side of the body for about another minute here. Deepening that edge if you feel it's appropriate for you. And you're stretching the fascia. And the fascia is all interconnected, so it can communicate. The fascia that's on the right side of the body can communicate with the fascia that's on the left side of the body. It's an entire network that, like I mentioned, acts as a body stocking to hold all of our tissues, our muscles, and our bones, and our joints, and our fluid inside. You can imagine it like a second layer of skin underneath the skin. Yin stretches and stresses, I should say, the fascia. Next 2 breaths or so, preparing to transition back to center. And all we have left here is a twist. And this twist for you might look like hugging both knees into the chest and then dropping them off to the left side with the legs stacked. If you'd like to deepen the sensation, you could cross like so, your right leg on top of your left, shift the hips to the right, and then drop the knees to the left. And I'll go ahead and begin the timer here. Not long, just using this pose to cool down, about a minute each side. If you have this bind in the legs, you're getting some nice internal rotation through the thighs, at the hips, to really counter out some of the external rotation that we found in our shoelace, in our swan pose. All the three principles still apply: finding the edge, becoming still, holding for time, but actually now getting ready to transition to the second side. It's been a minute. So unwinding the legs, passing back through knees into chest, or even a happy baby pose if you'd like, before preparing to the second side, letting the knees fall off to the right. It might be that your left leg crosses on top of your right, hips move left, knees move right. One minute here. Reclined twist for your second side. When you're ready, gently shifting the legs back through center. We've arrived at our last posture now, so maybe hugging the knees into the chest, taking that last happy baby if you'd like it, and then preparing the body for Shavasana. You might like to have a bolster or some pillows underneath the knees. Create a little bit of length in the lower back. Maybe slip some socks on, drape a blanket over your entire body as you relax back. Sometimes an eye pillow feels nice, and if you don't have an eye pillow, just simply taking a folded towel over the eyes. Create a little more darkness. Yin is the side of darkness. We all have yin inside of us. We all have darkness inside of us. Is there a non-discriminatory way to view that darkness as a part of us? Not as something that is bad or evil or unpure, but as an essential part of life. The part that balances and contrasts the light in our experience. I'll invite you to rest here in Shavasana for a number of moments. Letting go. Maybe using the breath to coax you into a deeper state of relax. Elongating inhales, elongating exhales. But eventually letting that go too. So there is no sense of doing here. Simply being. If you'd like to remain here in your Shavasana, please stay right where you are. Otherwise, an invitation to bring your awareness back to your breath. Let the breath start to wiggle the fingertips, wiggle the toes, and gently reintroduce some movement into your body here. As you prepare to come back up, you can draw the knees in and roll off to your left side, maybe remaining there in a fetal position for a few breaths. And then coming back to your seat, please. It can be the same seat that you started the practice in, or maybe something different. A block underneath the hips may feel supportive for you. Inviting in some length into your spine. Invitation to close the eyes here. Just for a moment at the end of the practice, to bring back this idea of being intentional with our attention. Where do you intend to let your attention rest here? And in resting your attention on your experience in this moment, this present moment, what do you experience? Welcome in the practice of listening and receiving. Yin-like qualities that balance out speaking or giving. An invitation to pull a prayer to your heart here. Feel the right and left side come together at the heart center. And we'll close with one long sound of the pranava, Om. Deep breath in. Om. Namaste, yogis. Thank you so much for letting me serve you this morning, for taking a little journey to the yin side.